All right, sticking in the NFL, but moving over from the NFC to the AFC, we have some serious quarterback controversy, which we all knew was coming. This is not a surprise to anybody that knows anything about football. Joe Flacco will no longer be the starter for the Cleveland Browns. Shocker. We're so surprised. So now the big question is, will Sheduer Sanders ever get his chance? Obviously, he's the bigger star among all the quarterbacks there, but he started the season fourth on the depth chart. They, of course, traded away Kenny Pickett, which moved him up to third on the depth chart. So now Dillon Gabriel, who was drafted just 2 rounds ahead of Sheduer by the Browns, will start this week for the Cleveland Browns. We'll see how well he does. But, Byron and I were talking about this before the show, and apparently Sheduer is actually listed, Byron, as the third quarterback still. So Flacco's just been bumped down to number 2. Is that right?
Yes. As far as I know, yes.
Okay, so that might be what the depth chart says, but let's be real. If Dillon Gabriel's getting his butt kicked out there, if he's throwing pick sixes and he's looking awful, he's taking sacks, he's just doing poorly, do we really think they're just going to put Flacco back in? They already know what Flacco is. He was a great quarterback. He's a fantastic veteran presence. He's not the quarterback of the future for anyone. He's just too old. It's not a knock on him. It's just his time has passed as like a go-to franchise quarterback. Sheduer and Dillon Gabriel are the two battling it out. I've said this clear back when the draft happened months ago. It is Dillon Gabriel versus Sheduer Sanders. Kenny Pickett's not the long-term answer. He's not on the team anymore. And Joe Flacco's clearly not the answer. So I think that even if Sheduer is listed as the third quarterback on the depth chart going into this week, if Dillon Gabriel gets hurt, heaven forbid, or if he's playing poorly, I think you will see Sheduer Sanders enter the game, not Joe Flacco. I don't know, though. What do you think, Byron?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by Sheduer not being the number 2 QB because sometimes when a starter is bumped down, depending on the whole quarterback situation, maybe the starter goes to 3 and then number 2 moves up and then 3 goes to 2. Some teams kind of have it that way, some teams don't, but I was very surprised. But here we are. Dillon Gabriel is getting the start, and I agree with you because I'm not sure if the Browns will go back to Flacco after they've seen
Why would you? Yeah.
how he's been playing throughout the season, and it hasn't been the best. And I agree with you. He is older, and his time has kind of pretty much been wearing down in the NFL. And so I think the smart thing to do would be to see what you have for the future, at least find out what you have now and sort of build on that. But I wasn't really surprised by Dillon Gabriel getting the start, but I'm thinking Sheduer will get a chance this year. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It really just depends on how Gabriel plays, but that's something to make note of.
Yep. He'll get his chance. I don't know if he'll get a chance to start. Like you say, it depends on how Dillon Gabriel plays, but he will get a chance to play in games. And I'm not going to wish injury upon anyone. And I like Dillon Gabriel. I like Sheduer Sanders. I hope they both play really well and get their shot. But those are two promising rookies. I think Sheduer has the more raw talent, but there's just so much else that goes along with Sheduer. So many kind of, I guess, off the field distractions. It's kind of like when Tim Tebow is on a team. If you remember those days, I know you're a big Tebow fan. There's just so much like fandom around him that it's almost like a nuisance to the coaches and to ownership, where it's like, is this guy really worth even having on the team? I'm a big Jimmer Fredette fan. I think he was similar to that. He's a friend of mine, and he was the greatest basketball player in the history of BYU. And I think he could have been a far better NBA player than he was given a chance to be. But there's just so much like fandom and pressure around guys like that are so popular and polarizing. Unless you're like a true superstar, the coaches and the ownership are like, I don't want to really deal with that. Let's not have him. So I think that's probably why you saw Sheduer slip in the draft, was just not wanting to deal with that. Johnny Manziel was another one. Do you remember Johnny Manziel? He was another Browns quarterback. But anyway, we'll see. I think it's a very fun story to watch, though, the Browns QB situation. We knew it was coming to this. It happened pretty quick. Here we are, week 5, and it's already down to Dillon Gabriel versus Sheduer Sanders. Because if you're the Browns, you're crazy to put Joe Flacco in the game again, go back to Joe Flacco, instead of at least seeing what Sheduer Sanders can do. Joe Flacco's not going to be around for the next couple of years. Like he's a veteran presence, and that's all he should be. Sheduer's a young kid. He's a rookie. So if you're going to move off Dillon Gabriel, you better move on to Sheduer Sanders, because he should be the next man up, because you're trying to find your quarterback of the future, and it is not Joe Flacco. We know that for sure. So that's my take on that.